Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar, GP Tips and Tricks Managing Fixed Assets. I'm Megan Turco, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use your webinar console. The orange arrow on the right side of your screen will toggle the control panel open or closed, and at the bottom of the control tray you'll see a chat window. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar via that chat function. Additionally, there should be an audio settings area on your GoToWebinar console. If you're calling in through your telephone, please be sure to choose the Use Telephone option. Alternatively, if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. And today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be sending out the slides as well as the recording of the webinar within the next few days here, so please keep an eye out for that message if you're interested in accessing the recording or the slides themselves after today. And with that, I would like to introduce today's speakers. So we have Megan Fall, who is a senior consultant for our Dynamics GP practice here at Armanino. She's got over 6 years of experience implementing and supporting GP and is a Microsoft certified professional in GP financials, supply chain, and implementation with a lot of experience in Management Reporter and Integration Manager. We also have Seher Ahmed with us today, who is also a senior consultant for our GP practice here at Armanino. She's got years of experience supporting and implementing GP and is also a Microsoft certified professional in GP financials, inventory, and order processing. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Megan.
Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. Just a brief overview of our presentation. We're going to discuss fixed asset setup and how to create a new asset. We're also going to discuss depreciation and how to post to the GL after you run your depreciation. Once that's concluded, we are going to look up transactions to verify that they hit the general ledger properly, and we're going to review some specific tips and tricks. So the first item up is our fixed asset setup. Before you can begin setting up your assets, you have to create classes for your items. In GP 2013 R2, we have an additional option for you, which is to default the next asset ID from the class setup window. You can set up your classes in multiple ways. They can either, most often it's by type of item. You can also do it by location if that works better for you. One other thing that we want to make sure that you select when you're setting up your class ID is the account group ID. The account groups are the specific GL accounts that will be associated to that particular class. So in this particular instance with the screenshot, we have the class ID of automobiles and the account group is vehicles. There might be multiple types of vehicles or types of automobiles. Vehicles could be one because this is a fleet vehicle. There might also be additional types of things that could be used, but in this particular instance, we have it associated with vehicles as the default. That does not mean that you can't change the accounts. It's just the defaults that are going to be used during depreciation and other transactions. The next thing that you need to set up is the calendar associated with your fixed assets. Also something interesting for 2013 is that you can have multiple calendars set up for your fixed assets. Almost everybody is going to have a default calendar, which is your baseline. You can have that be your fiscal calendar. If you have a calendar year, if your fiscal year and your calendar year are not the same, you may decide that it's useful to set up two calendars, one for the fiscal year and one for the calendar year. You would select the specific year and you would build the calendar out. You can build additional calendars for many years ahead if you would like. We have a lot of clients who build in 20-year increments, so you could build from 2000 to 2020 all in one shot, and that way you rarely have to come in and change your your calendar setup for your fixed assets. The next setup item is you want to set up your books. You can set up several books. Most people have a corporate or internal, and then there's usually a tax. There might be a third in some instances, but at least those two are generally very common. You would select a current fiscal year for your asset, and the fiscal year updates itself when you run the year-end close process for your fixed asset. So that will automatically roll the year forward. So you need to make sure that you do run your year-end close process. Additionally, you're going to need to select a depreciation period. Is it periodic? Is it daily? How is this being depreciated? And then there's a little select option called Auto Add Book Info. And that is basically allows you, if you would like, to automatically populate the book when you generate a new asset. So our first step on creating a new asset is the general card. When you go into your financials in GP, under the cards list, you'll find fixed assets, which is underneath all of the regular financials. It's in its own little subheading. And then you'll select general. Here you're going to create your asset ID, which you can either default if that's what you've got set up on your class ID, or you just simply enter your asset ID and select or enter a description in whatever format works best for you. You can also assign a master ID if you would like to do so. If you have multiple assets under the same kind of heading, in this case, let's say chairs, that might be useful to you. However, if you're just doing every asset individually, then the master assets will just simply be the same as your asset ID. The class ID is, again, something you need to select. It's a required field. You also need to decide on the type, which is either new, used, or lease, and then the property type as well. Generally, it's going to be personal, but it could be improvement or something else as well. The acquisition date is another required field that you have to enter. This should be normally the date that you buy the item. You're also going to enter your acquisition cost, and these are going to create the initial transaction for your asset, for adding your asset. The account group is actually going to default off of the class ID that you enter, and you can also give it a physical location or regular location ID. So the difference between the physical location and location ID is generally the region. So if you have a Boston office and a San Francisco office and a Dallas office, the location ID would be where you would say, this is in Boston. And then the physical location could probably be the person's office, so the office number that chair is located in. And that way you can keep track of both the regional location and the specific physical location of the item. You can enter multiple quantities if you would like. We see this often if people buy computers by the lot. So if you buy 15 Dell PCs that are all exactly identical, you can simply enter one asset ID and say that there's 15 quantity. They all have the exact same acquisition date and the total acquisition cost, and that way you're depreciating them all at the same rate at the same time on the same asset, and it just makes things a little more clean and easy to manage if you have identical series of assets. Okay, the next step is going to be creating the book card. Now, if you have that checkbox selected where it's going to auto add the book information, it will at least create this so that when you go in to the book, you pull up your asset, you can then pull up the book ID, and some of the information will have been automatically entered. Things like the depreciation method should be standardized. Here you're going to add your place in service date. This could be different than your acquisition date. However, it's best practice if you can have them be, if not the same date, within the same period. We do understand that there are some times where you acquire something, but it's not placed in service for quite a long time. Computers are, again, another instance of this. Often your corporation will get computers in, and they'll acquire them in lots, but then they have to customize the computers, and that might take a couple of weeks or so. The idea, though, is you want it to be as close to the acquisition date as you can get, because the difference can cause some issues with how your depreciation for the year looks. So just something to keep in mind when you're entering assets. You want to try and do it as quickly as possible. The next items that you want to make sure that you enter on this window, so the depreciate to date and the original life, year, and days. So the first box on that is the years, and then the 3-digit second box is days. So if you have something that should be in your asset book for 3.5 years, you would enter 3 as the years, and then you'd have to decide if it's 150 or 170 something days for your half year. Let's see. So your cost basis should be the acquired cost. That should auto-populate in for you. And then the yearly depreciation rate, current depreciation, year-to-date, all of those depreciation boxes, those won't populate until you run depreciation the first time. Okay. So speaking of running depreciation, you'll find that under routines in financials. It's not a transaction, which is very unusual, I know, but it is listed under routines. You have 2 options for the depreciation process. You can either do the standard one, which just calls itself depreciation. And this one allows you to select depreciate all assets. It is the screenshot on the right-hand side if you're interested. And again, for GP 2013, there's a new added bonus. You actually have the ability to reverse a depreciation if you do it, let's say, to the wrong period. You can reverse that out. Before, in other versions of GP, unfortunately, you did not have any ability to reverse a depreciation. It was a done deal. So in this depreciation process, the main depreciation, you're depreciating all assets. The other depreciation option that you have is depreciate single asset. It's the same idea. You have a target date, you select your book. However, you can specify a single asset, and this is useful if you have an asset that just got placed in service. You could run depreciation separately for that particular asset if you wish to do so. Otherwise, you can just include it in all assets during the main depreciation process. So it's a very straightforward situation. You enter your target date, you select your book. You can select all books at once if you wish to do it all together, and then you hit the depreciation button at the top and it runs. This does not post directly to GP, and that takes me to my next slide, which is the GL posting window. This is also under routines, and basically this is the second step of any transaction or any routine that you do with fixed assets. You have to run this in order to post it to the GL, and what this is going to do is it's going to create a financials batch for the summary information of the depreciation that you just ran. So the screenshot shows that you can select a period. The periods are a little unusual because you're actually putting the year first. The first 4 digits is the year, dash, 0, and then the number of periods. So if you needed to do December of 2014, you'd see 2014-012. That would be your period as a restriction. So if you want to, you can enter a restriction if you're unsure if you don't depreciate every single month. You can just leave all zeros, and then it'll go all the way to the beginning of all periods and check for any transaction that has not previously been uploaded into a financials batch. So once you have selected your list, it will populate down below so that you can double check it and confirm that you want to include everything. And then you just simply hit post up at the top, and then that processes it through to create a GL batch. You would then see it in the GL list, and from here is where if you wish to change the account numbers, you can change them at that time in the financials batch. Okay, and once everything has been done, of course we need to have a way to go back and look at what we've done for our different assets. The best option is the FA Historical Depreciation Report. And this gives you the ability to, you can do it by classes I've got here in this screenshot if you wish, or you can do it for all assets, but you can select a specific book to run this for, and you can include either active, retired, or partially open assets. You can include all or a combination of those. And you can also select options instead of just depreciation as of end of previous calendar year, as I have selected here. You can change it to a monthly look back. There are many different options. You can even select enter year and then specify a date range. And then you simply run the report, and that should show you all of your depreciation that's happened in the last whatever your date range is going to be. This is really good for year-end close information. We highly recommend it as part of your year-end process. And then also if you're looking up a very specific item and you want to see what's been happening, like especially if you run the depreciation but you don't know why it's not hitting the general ledger, you can come here and look up the asset, and you can see there's many different ways that you can filter the account type. If you select all types, it will show you everything, but it will also collapse all of the filters so that you can't see them. So that's why I've left them all open here so that you can see what the options are. But if you select all, then you'd see things like the initial cost transaction at the beginning here, which is that $650, which was the acquisition cost of the item. So that's the first transaction that you'll see, and it hits a clearing account, so you'll see that as well. After that, you'll see every depreciation that's happened for this asset, and then at the end you would probably see a retirement transaction if there is one to be had. What you'll also notice is that the batch number is included in this inquiry. If you have run the depreciation but it hasn't hit the general ledger, you can come here, and if you see the transaction but there's no batch number assigned, then that means that you have not run the GL posting process, and that's what you need to go back and do. And as soon as you do that, that's when you'll see the batch and you can post it through to the GL. Okay, so some tips and tricks summary, just to remind you. New for GP 2013, we have the default asset ID from the class, and that's that one's mostly just for GP R2, or sorry, GP 2013 R2. Also in GP 2013 is the multiple fixed asset calendars and the ability to reverse the depreciation. And then just some things to keep in mind, as we've mentioned, just to make sure that you're running the GL posting after you run the depreciation, and then also to make sure that that if you need to look up a transaction in inquiry and you're not sure why it's not hitting the GL, that you just double check that a batch number has been created for it. We also wanted to note on here that you can add fixed assets from payables or purchasing. We don't really have the ability to go into that in this particular demonstration, but we can show you that. If you would be interested, you can contact us directly for that. And now we'll be moving on to our quick demo in just a moment. Basically, we just wanted to give you a live overview of what we've discussed so far. Oops. Get that out of the way. Okay, so in GP, fixed assets runs off of the financials batches. And as I mentioned before, you'll see all of this financial information, but if you collapse all of that, fixed assets is just below. And it's the same in the transactions window and in the routines window as well. You'll see fixed assets directly underneath all of the financial information. So we'll start again with our general card, and we'll pick up an asset. Let's select our chair that we've been looking at today. And just to show you that here's our class ID setup, and here we've got our account group selected, and if we open the account group, it shows us all of the different expense accounts and clearing accounts and everything that we've got set up for this particular account group. Okay, so those are what is going to default whenever we run a process for our item. Okay, that's the primary thing I wanted you to note on the general window. The other thing that's very nice is that in Assets it's very easy to move between windows. You have this Go To button over in the corner, and that allows you to jump from the general card all the way to the book card, which we will go to next. So we've got our asset, and we're going to select, let's select the internal book. And we can see our place and service date, and we can see our depreciation to date. We can also see our yearly depreciation rate and current depreciation. All of these populate once we've started running depreciation for the asset. If we hit the links, cost basis doesn't go anywhere really, but if we go year-to-date depreciation or life-to-date depreciation, that will pull up the inquiry window, and it will see depreciation, and we can hit redisplay, or we can hit all, and that will show us a little bit more. Oh, I see. Sorry. Period filter is on. Okay, so if we redisplay, and so you can tell there are some transactions that, or there's some depreciation that has been run but has not, the GL posting process has not been run because they're missing the batch number here, but the depreciation transaction itself shows. So we would need to go and process that to complete having it hit the general ledger. Okay. And let's see. So we'll move from here to show you the process, the depreciation process. So let me collapse this to make it a little easier to see. So under routines, here's your two options. Here's depreciate, which is the regular main depreciation, and then the depreciate one asset. So that's if you want to run this process for only a specific item, if you need to catch up on something. So we'll look here and depreciate all assets again. We select our target date, and because this is Fabricam demo, we have to use some unusual dates. So let's do through December 31st of 2007. And we'll select all books. So that just moves them into the selected column. And we hit depreciate. And it asks you, do you wish to depreciate all assets? And we say yes. And it runs. And it's a very quick process. We would then go to our GL posting, and it's going to auto-populate a batch ID. It's going to give you a posting date, which is going to assume the current date. You can change that if you wish it to be on a specific date. And if we wish to, we can select a period. Again, we can select a period if we want. I'm going to show you the maximum number of items, so I'm going to select all, and that way it's 0, 0, and that it'll show everything. And when I hit process, that's what's going to populate my list. It hasn't actually created or posted the batch yet. It's just simply added this grouping to the list. So you can see I've got a significant number of depreciation transactions that we're going to run, and as soon as we're ready, we just hit post, and all goes well. It will pop up a list. Okay, fantastic. So we've done the GL posting, and if we go into, I'm going to show you how to find the list. Where is series post? Okay, if I look in series post, this is not how we normally suggest that you run, that you post through the general ledger, but I wanted to just show you that I have two fixed asset batches here. FATRX is the abbreviation or the prefix that indicates that it's a fixed assets transaction. So anything like that is just a pass-through, and you would select those and post them, and that would hit the general ledger. And so that's the end of our demo here. We'll go back and answer any particular questions that have come through. Let's see, what have we got?
So it does look like we have a few questions. The first one here is, if using the quantity field, what happens if you have to delete one of the items?
Using a quantity field. Oh, so if you're, okay, so if you had 15 and you got rid of one item or one, let's think. I believe if you've already run the depreciation for 1 month, I don't know that it'll let you change the quantity total. You would probably have to, we'd have to take that as a support question and discuss it a little further. That would be one of those things where we have to see how far along your asset is before you would made a change.
All right. Thank you, Megan. We do have a few more coming in. Let's see here. What happens if you change the remaining life on an asset?
Okay, that's a good question. So if you change the remaining life, it is an editable field, so you could reduce the life. So let's say you accidentally put in 10 years for the life of the item and it should have been only 7 years. And so the depreciation is going to change, and so that prompts a revaluation, and you have to run another routine called revalue life, or you have two options: revalue depreciation year and revalue depreciation life. If you've only had the asset for a couple of months, you probably would just do revalue year. But if you've had it for quite a while, then you'll probably have to run the revalue life, and so that will just go back and it will recalculate, and it will actually change the depreciation that's been posted to all prior months, all prior periods for that item. So it's a big deal if you're going to do it. Sometimes it's easier just to retire the asset and create a new one. So that's a good question.
Thanks, Megan. So I think we are actually just about out of time. We do have a number of other questions. Thank you all for submitting these great questions. We will get answers back to you after the webinar, since we're kind of running out of time today, but we will follow up. So I did want to thank Megan and Zahir for being our wonderful featured speakers today. And as you all exit, there will be a quick survey. Please take a moment to let us know your thoughts on how today's webinar went. And as Megan mentioned, definitely if you are interested in seeing a bit more about the fixed assets or a demo or anything like that, definitely feel free to contact us, and we are happy to show a demo for you. And as you see, Megan and Zahir's emails and phones are up on the screen. So definitely keep an eye out for the recording coming out in a few days, and thank you everyone for joining us today.